Understanding Amish gardening philosophy requires recognizing their fundamental belief that human beings are caretakers of the earth, responsible for nurturing the land that sustains them. This perspective shapes every aspect of their horticultural practices, from seed selection to harvest methods. The Amish view gardening not merely as a means of food production, but as a sacred responsibility that connects them to their creator and to the natural world. This spiritual dimension infuses their practical techniques with a deeper purpose, creating gardens that are both productive and environmentally harmonious. The first fundamental trick employed by Amish gardeners revolves around their sophisticated understanding of companion planting, a practice that maximizes garden productivity while minimizing pest problems and soil depletion. This ancient technique, refined through generations of Amish experience, involves strategically placing different plant species in close proximity to create mutually beneficial relationships. The Amish have observed that certain plants, when grown together, enhance each other's growth, improve soil nutrition, and provide natural pest control mechanisms that eliminate the need for synthetic chemicals. Their companion planting wisdom extends far beyond the commonly known combinations like the Three Sisters method of growing corn, beans, and squash together. Amish gardeners have developed intricate planting schemes that consider not only the obvious benefits of nitrogen fixation and structural support, but also the subtle chemical interactions between plants, the timing of root development, and the complex underground networks that plants create to share nutrients and information. For instance, they plant marigolds throughout their vegetable gardens not simply for their beauty, but because these flowers produce compounds that naturally repel nematodes, aphids, and other harmful insects. The Amish understand that marigolds' root secretions create an underground barrier that protects neighboring vegetables from soil-borne pests, while their bright flowers attract beneficial insects that pollinate crops and prey on garden pests. Similarly, they interplant basil with tomatoes, recognizing that basil's volatile oils improve tomato flavor while deterring hornworms and other tomato-specific pests. This pairing demonstrates the Amish understanding that companion planting serves multiple purposes simultaneously, addressing nutrition, pest control, and flavor enhancement through a single strategic decision. The Amish also employ trap cropping as part of their companion planting strategy, deliberately planting specific crops that attract pests away from their main vegetables. They might plant nasturtiums to lure aphids away from lettuce and other greens, or use radishes as a trap crop for flea beetles that would otherwise damage their brassicas. This technique shows their sophisticated understanding of insect behavior and their preference for working with natural systems rather than against them. Their knowledge of allelopathy, the chemical warfare that some plants wage against others, allows them to prevent weed growth naturally. They plant sunflowers knowing that these giants release chemicals that suppress the growth of certain weeds, creating natural weed-free zones around valuable crops. Similarly, they use the allelopathic properties of rye and other cover crops to prevent weed seeds from germinating when preparing new garden beds. The second major trick involves their masterful approach to soil building and fertility management, which forms the foundation of all successful Amish gardens. Rather than viewing soil as merely a growing medium, the Amish understand it as a living ecosystem that requires careful nurturing and constant attention. Their soil management practices focus on building organic matter, maintaining proper mineral balance, and fostering the complex microbial communities that make nutrients available to plants. Central to their soil-building philosophy is the extensive use of composting, but their composting methods go far beyond simply piling organic matter and waiting for decomposition. Amish composting represents a sophisticated understanding of the biological processes that transform organic waste into nutrient-rich humus. They carefully balance carbon-rich materials like straw, leaves, and sawdust with nitrogen-rich materials such as fresh manure, kitchen scraps, and green plant matter to create the optimal conditions for decomposition. Their compost piles are constructed with precise attention to moisture levels, air circulation, and temperature management. They build their compost in layers, alternating carbon and nitrogen sources while maintaining the proper carbon-to-nitrogen ratio that promotes rapid decomposition without creating anaerobic conditions that produce foul odors or harmful bacteria. The Amish also practice vermicomposting, using earthworms to accelerate the composting process and create exceptionally rich castings that serve as premium fertilizer for their gardens. They maintain worm bins throughout the year, feeding kitchen scraps and garden waste to red wiggler worms that transform organic matter into concentrated nutrients. These worm castings are then used to enrich potting mixes, side dress growing plants, and create liquid fertilizers that provide immediate nutrition to crops. Beyond composting, Amish soil building includes the strategic use of cover crops and green manures that protect and enrich the soil during periods when food crops are not growing. They plant winter rye, crimson clover, buckwheat, and other cover crops that prevent soil erosion, suppress weeds, and add organic matter when incorporated into the soil. Their selection of cover crops considers not only the organic matter they provide, but also their root structures, which help improve soil texture and create channels for water infiltration and root penetration. Leguminous cover crops play a particularly important role in Amish soil management, as these plants form symbiotic relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms that plants can use. By rotating legume cover crops with their vegetable crops, the Amish naturally replenish soil nitrogen without relying on synthetic fertilizers that can disrupt soil microbiology and contribute to environmental pollution. The third trick focuses on their sophisticated water management strategies that ensure consistent plant growth while conserving this precious resource. Amish gardeners have developed irrigation and water conservation techniques that work within natural rainfall patterns while providing supplemental moisture when needed. Their water management philosophy emphasizes efficiency, sustainability, and the importance of deep root development that makes plants more resilient to drought conditions. Mulching forms the cornerstone of Amish water conservation efforts, but their mulching practices extend far beyond simply covering soil with organic matter. They select mulching materials based on their specific benefits to different crops, considering factors such as decomposition rate, nutrient content, pest deterrent properties, and aesthetic appearance. Straw mulch is applied around vegetables to retain soil moisture, suppress weeds, and gradually decompose to add organic matter to the soil. They use grass clippings as mulch around perennial plants, taking advantage of their rapid decomposition to provide quick nutrition while protecting soil from evaporation. However, they apply grass clippings in thin layers to prevent matting and ensure proper air circulation to plant roots. Wood chips and shredded bark are reserved for paths and around trees and shrubs where longer-lasting mulch is desired. The Amish also practice deep watering techniques that encourage plants to develop extensive root systems capable of accessing moisture from deeper soil layers. Rather than frequent shallow watering that keeps roots near the surface, they water less frequently but more thoroughly, allowing water to penetrate deeply into the soil profile. This approach creates drought-resistant plants that can survive extended dry periods without stress. They employ drip irrigation systems in larger gardens, using gravity-fed systems that deliver water directly to plant roots with minimal waste through evaporation or runoff. These systems are often constructed using simple materials like plastic bottles with small holes punched in them or perforated pipes that slowly release water over extended periods. The simplicity of these systems reflects the Amish preference for technology that can be easily maintained and repaired without relying on complex mechanical systems or electric power. Rainwater harvesting represents another crucial component of Amish water management, with collection systems that capture and store precipitation for use during dry periods. They construct rain barrels, cisterns, and other collection systems that gather water from rooftops and other surfaces, providing a sustainable source of irrigation water that reduces dependence on wells or municipal water supplies. These collection systems are often integrated into the garden design, serving both functional and aesthetic purposes, while demonstrating their commitment to resource conservation. The fourth trick involves their masterful timing and seasonal planning that maximizes garden productivity throughout the growing season. Amish gardeners possess an intimate understanding of their local climate patterns, frost dates, and seasonal variations that allows them to plant plantings for continuous harvest from early spring through late fall. Their seasonal planning considers not only when to plant different crops, but also how to sequence plantings for succession harvests and how to prepare gardens for seasonal transitions. Their spring garden preparation begins long before the last frost, with cold frames and row covers that extend the growing season and protect tender plants from temperature fluctuations. They construct cold frames using recycled windows or clear plastic sheeting, creating mini greenhouses that capture solar energy to warm soil and air around plants. These structures allow them to start plants weeks earlier than would otherwise be possible, giving them a significant advantage in areas with short growing seasons. Succession planting represents a sophisticated scheduling technique that ensures continuous harvests of crops like lettuce, radishes, and beans throughout the growing season. Rather than planting all their lettuce at once and harvesting it over a brief period, they plant small amounts every 2 to 3 weeks, creating a steady supply of fresh greens from spring through fall. This technique requires careful planning and record keeping to ensure proper timing and avoid gaps in production. They also practice intercropping, growing quick-maturing crops between rows of slower-growing vegetables to maximize space utilization and extend harvest periods. For example, they might plant lettuce between rows of tomatoes, harvesting the lettuce before the tomatoes need the full space. This technique allows them to produce more food in limited space while ensuring that soil is never left bare and unproductive. The Amish understanding of moon phases and their influence on plant growth adds another dimension to their timing strategies. They plant root crops during the waning moon, believing that the decreasing lunar pole encourages root development, while planting leafy crops during the waxing moon when the increasing lunar pole is thought to promote above-ground growth. While modern science debates the validity of lunar influence on plant growth, the Amish maintain these traditions as part of their holistic approach to gardening that considers all natural cycles and influences. The fifth trick encompasses their comprehensive approach to natural pest and disease management that maintains garden health without relying on synthetic chemicals. Amish pest management philosophy emphasizes prevention through healthy soil, proper plant spacing, and biodiversity, while employing targeted interventions when problems arise. Their integrated approach addresses pest problems at multiple levels, from soil microorganisms to beneficial insect populations to physical barriers and deterrents. Beneficial insect habitat creation forms a crucial component of their pest management strategy, with deliberate efforts to attract and maintain populations of predatory and parasitic insects that control pest species naturally. They plant flowers specifically chosen to provide nectar and pollen for beneficial insects throughout the growing season, ensuring that these helpful allies have the resources they need to establish stable populations in and around the garden. Their flower selection for beneficial insects goes beyond simple aesthetic considerations, incorporating plants that bloom at different times to provide continuous food sources for beneficial insects. They plant early blooming flowers like sweet alyssum and calendula to support beneficial insects in spring, followed by summer flowers like zinnias and cosmos, and finishing with late blooming asters and goldenrod that provide food sources into fall. Physical pest exclusion methods play an important role in Amish pest management, with row covers, screens, and barriers that prevent pest insects from reaching vulnerable crops. They use lightweight fabric covers to protect young plants from flea beetles, cucumber beetles, and other small pests, removing the covers when plants are large enough to tolerate pest pressure or when pollination is required. They also employ trap crops strategically placed around the garden perimeter to intercept migrating pests before they reach valuable vegetables. These sacrificial plants attract pests away from main crops and concentrate them in areas where they can be easily monitored and controlled if necessary. Companion planting for pest control represents another sophisticated aspect of their pest management approach, with specific plant combinations that create chemical and physical barriers to pest insects. They interplant strongly scented herbs like rosemary, thyme, and sage among vegetables to confuse pest insects that locate host plants by scent. These aromatic plants mask the scent signals that pests use to find their preferred food sources, effectively hiding vegetables from pest detection. The sixth trick involves their seed saving and plant selection practices that create adapted varieties perfectly suited to local growing conditions. Amish seed saving represents generations of careful selection that has produced vegetables and flowers specifically adapted to local climate conditions, soil types, and pest pressures. Their seed-saving practices maintain genetic diversity while improving plant performance through careful selection of the best-performing individual plants. Their seed saving begins with variety selection, choosing open-pollinated varieties that will produce offspring similar to their parents rather than hybrid varieties that may not reproduce true to type. They maintain heirloom varieties that have been passed down through generations, preserving genetic resources that might otherwise be lost to commercial agriculture's focus on uniformity and shipping characteristics rather than flavor, nutrition, and local adaptation. The selection process involves careful observation of plant performance throughout the growing season, identifying individual plants that demonstrate superior characteristics such as disease resistance, productivity, flavor, or adaptation to local conditions. They mark these exceptional plants and save seeds only from the best performers, gradually improving their varieties through this careful selection process. They also practice isolation techniques to prevent cross-pollination between different varieties of the same species, ensuring that saved seeds will produce plants with desired characteristics. This might involve separating varieties by distance, using physical barriers, or timing plantings so that different varieties flower at different times and cannot cross-pollinate. Storage techniques for saved seeds ensure viability for multiple years, with proper drying, packaging, and storage conditions that maintain seed germination rates. They test germination rates of stored seeds before planting to ensure good stand establishment and adjust planting densities based on expected germination percentages. The seventh trick encompasses their sophisticated composting and organic matter management that creates rich, fertile soil teeming with beneficial microorganisms. Beyond basic composting, the Amish employ multiple organic matter management strategies that address different aspects of soil fertility and structure improvement. Their organic management considers the different decomposition rates and nutrient profiles of various organic materials, using each type strategically to achieve specific soil improvement goals. Sheet mulching, also known as lasagna gardening, represents one of their most effective soil building techniques. This method involves layering organic materials directly on the soil surface in a pattern similar to lasagna construction, with alternating layers of carbon-rich and nitrogen-rich materials that decompose slowly to create rich, dark soil. This technique eliminates the need for tilling while building soil structure and fertility simultaneously. The construction of sheet mulch begins with a cardboard or newspaper layer that suppresses weeds and existing vegetation while allowing water and air to penetrate. Over this base, they layer coarse organic materials like branches and woody stems that provide structure and air channels, followed by layers of leaves, straw, kitchen scraps, and manure. The layering continues until the pile reaches the desired height, typically 18 to 24 inches, which will decompose to a few inches of rich soil over the course of a growing season. They also employ bokashi composting, a fermentation technique that uses beneficial microorganisms to break down organic matter in an anaerobic environment. This method allows them to compost materials like meat and dairy products that are typically avoided in traditional composting, while creating a nutrient-rich amendment that can be buried directly in garden beds to feed plants throughout the growing season. Liquid fertilizers represent another aspect of their organic matter management, with compost teas and fermented plant extracts that provide immediately available nutrients to growing plants. They brew compost tea by soaking finished compost in water for several days, creating a nutrient-rich liquid that can be applied directly to plant roots or sprayed on foliage as a foliar feed. The eighth trick involves their sophisticated understanding of microclimate creation and management within the garden space. Amish gardeners recognize that small variations in temperature, humidity, air circulation, and light exposure can dramatically affect plant performance, and they deliberately create microclimates that optimize growing conditions for different crops. Their microclimate management techniques allow them to grow plants that might otherwise struggle in their general climate zone while extending growing seasons and improving crop quality. Windbreak establishment represents a fundamental aspect of microclimate management, with strategic placement of trees, shrubs, and structures that protect gardens from damaging winds while creating more favorable growing conditions. They plant deciduous trees on the south and west sides of gardens to provide summer shade while allowing winter sun to reach growing areas. Evergreen trees and shrubs are placed on the north and northwest sides to block cold winter winds while maintaining protection year-round. Heat island creation involves using thermal mass like stones, water features, and dark-colored surfaces to absorb solar energy during the day and release it slowly at night, moderating temperature fluctuations and extending the growing season. They place large stones or water barrels in strategic locations to create warm microclimates around heat-loving plants like tomatoes and peppers, while using light-colored mulches and shade structures to create cooler conditions for crops that prefer moderate temperatures. Elevation changes within the garden create different drainage and temperature conditions that can be used to accommodate plants with different environmental preferences. They build raised beds for plants that require good drainage while creating depressed areas that collect moisture for plants that prefer consistently moist soil. These elevation changes also affect air circulation patterns, with higher areas receiving better air movement while lower areas may be more protected from wind. The ninth trick encompasses their integrated approach to season extension that allows them to harvest fresh vegetables well beyond the typical growing season. Amish season extension techniques combine traditional methods with innovative applications of simple technology to create growing environments that protect plants from frost, cold temperatures, and harsh weather conditions. Their season extension philosophy emphasizes working with natural cycles while employing protective measures that extend productive periods without requiring complex heating systems or expensive infrastructure. Cold frame construction and management represents sophisticated applications of solar energy capture and retention that create protected growing environments for cool season crops. They build cold frames using recycled materials like old windows, storm doors, and salvaged lumber, creating structures that capture and retain solar energy while protecting plants from wind and precipitation. The design and management of these cold frames requires understanding of ventilation requirements, temperature monitoring, and crop selection for optimal results. Row covers and tunnel systems provide flexible protection that can be easily installed and removed as weather conditions change. They use lightweight fabric covers supported by wire hoops or bent PVC pipe to create protective tunnels over crop rows, providing several degrees of frost protection while maintaining light transmission for photosynthesis. These systems can be quickly deployed when frost threatens and removed during warm periods to prevent overheating. Succession planting for fall and winter harvest requires careful timing and variety selection to ensure crops reach maturity before harsh weather arrives. They plant cool season varieties in late summer that will continue growing through fall and can be harvested throughout winter and protected environments. This timing requires understanding of days to maturity, variety cold tolerance, and local climate patterns to achieve success. The 10th and final trick involves their comprehensive approach to garden planning and record keeping that ensures continuous improvement and optimal resource utilization. Amish garden planning encompasses multiple years of crop rotation, resource allocation, and performance evaluation that creates increasingly productive and sustainable garden systems. Their planning process considers not only the current year's production goals, but also long-term soil health, pest management, and infrastructure development that builds garden capacity over time. Crop rotation planning represents a sophisticated understanding of plant family relationships, nutrient requirements, and soil impact that prevents pest and disease buildup while maintaining soil fertility. They rotate crops from different plant families through garden sections on a multi-year cycle, ensuring that plants with similar pest and disease susceptibilities are not grown in the same location in consecutive years. This rotation also considers the different nutrient requirements and soil impact of various crops, with heavy feeders like corn and tomatoes, followed by light feeders like root vegetables and then soil-building legumes. Record-keeping systems track planting dates, variety performance, weather patterns, pest and disease problems, and harvest yields that provide data for future planning decisions. They maintain detailed garden journals that document what worked well and what problems occurred, creating a database of local growing information that guides future planting decisions. These records include variety evaluations, noting which cultivars performed best under local conditions and which should be discontinued or replaced. Space Space utilization planning maximizes garden productivity through careful consideration of plant spacing, vertical growing opportunities, and succession planting schedules. They create detailed garden maps that show the location of every crop throughout the growing season, ensuring optimal use of available space while providing adequate room for plant growth and maintenance activities. Infrastructure development planning considers long-term garden improvements like permanent bed construction, irrigation system installation, composting area development, and storage facility construction. This planning ensures that garden improvements are coordinated and cost-effective while building capacity for increased production and efficiency. These 10 fundamental tricks represent the core of Amish gardening wisdom, techniques that have been refined through generations of careful observation, experimentation, and adaptation to local conditions. Their integration creates garden systems that are productive, sustainable, and resilient, capable of providing abundant harvests while maintaining soil health and environmental balance. The success of these techniques lies not only in their individual effectiveness, but in their synergistic combination that creates gardens greater than the sum of their parts. The philosophical foundation underlying all these techniques emphasizes working with natural systems rather than against them, understanding that sustainable productivity requires maintaining the complex relationships between soil microorganisms, beneficial insects, plant communities, and environmental cycles. This approach creates gardens that become increasingly productive over time as soil health improves, beneficial populations establish themselves, and gardeners deepen their understanding of local growing conditions. Implementation of these techniques requires patience, observation, and willingness to adapt methods to local conditions and specific garden situations. While the principles remain consistent, their application must be tailored to local climate conditions, soil types, pest pressures, and available resources. Success comes through careful attention to detail, consistent application of sound principles, and continuous learning from both successes and failures. The environmental benefits of these techniques extend far beyond the garden boundaries, creating habitat for beneficial wildlife, preventing soil erosion, reducing chemical inputs that can pollute water sources, and sequestering carbon in soil organic matter. These gardens demonstrate that productive agriculture can enhance rather than degrade environmental quality when managed with wisdom and care. The economic advantages of Amish gardening techniques make them accessible to gardeners with limited resources, while providing abundant returns on modest investments. Their emphasis on using recycled materials, saving seeds, building soil fertility through composting, and preventing problems through good management practices creates highly productive gardens at minimal cost. Modern gardeners can adapt these time-tested techniques to contemporary situations, scaling methods appropriately for available space and resources while maintaining the fundamental principles that make them effective. Urban gardeners can employ container versions of these techniques, while suburban gardeners can implement full-scale systems that transform typical lawn areas into productive garden spaces. The social aspects of Amish gardening, including community seed exchanges, shared knowledge, and cooperative labor, provide models for building stronger local food systems and garden communities. These practices demonstrate how gardening can become a community-building activity that strengthens relationships while producing food security and environmental benefits. The spiritual dimensions of these gardening practices remind modern gardeners that working with soil and plants provides opportunities for reflection, connection with natural cycles, and appreciation for the complex web of life that sustains all existence. This perspective can transform gardening from a simple hobby into a meaningful practice that nurtures both body and soul while contributing to environmental stewardship. Educational opportunities abound in gardens managed using these traditional techniques, providing hands-on learning experiences for children and adults about biology, ecology, nutrition, and environmental stewardship. These gardens become outdoor classrooms where abstract concepts become tangible through direct observation and participation in natural processes. The preservation of these traditional techniques represents an important contribution to cultural heritage and sustainable agricultural knowledge. As industrial agriculture faces increasing challenges from environmental degradation, climate change, and resource depletion, these time-tested methods offer proven alternatives that can contribute to more sustainable food production systems. Research opportunities exist for documenting and quantifying the effectiveness of these traditional techniques, potentially validating traditional knowledge through modern scientific methods, while identifying the mechanisms that make these practices successful.
Such research could lead to broader adoption of sustainable gardening practices and integration of traditional wisdom with contemporary agricultural science. The adaptation of these techniques to different climate zones and growing conditions requires understanding the underlying principles that make them effective rather than simply copying specific practices. Gardeners in different regions must modify timing, plant selection, and specific methods while maintaining the fundamental approaches to soil building, pest management, water conservation, and seasonal planning that form the core of Amish gardening wisdom. Innovation opportunities exist for combining traditional techniques with appropriate modern technology, potentially enhancing effectiveness while maintaining sustainability and simplicity. Solar-powered irrigation timers, improved cold frame designs, and better materials for row covers represent examples of how traditional methods can be enhanced without abandoning their fundamental principles. The scalability of these techniques allows application in gardens of all sizes, from container gardens on apartment balconies to large market gardens that feed entire communities. The principles remain consistent regardless of scale, though specific implementation methods must be adapted to available space, resources, and production goals. Community applications of these techniques can transform neighborhoods through shared gardens, seed exchanges, composting programs, and educational initiatives that build local food security while strengthening social connections. Schools, community centers, and religious organizations can serve as focal points for sharing knowledge and coordinating community gardening efforts. The integration of these 10 fundamental techniques creates garden systems that demonstrate the possibility of abundant food production without environmental degradation, showing that human activity can enhance rather than diminish natural systems when guided with wisdom, patience, and respect for natural processes. These gardens serve as models for sustainable living that can inspire broader changes in how society approaches food production, environmental stewardship, and community building. Understanding and implementing these Amish gardening tricks requires commitment to long-term thinking, willingness to invest time in soil building and ecosystem development, and faith that natural systems will respond to careful management with increasing abundance and resilience. The rewards of this approach extend far beyond garden harvests, creating connections with natural cycles, opportunities for learning and growth, and contributions to environmental health that benefit current and future generations.